October 7 in the morning is what happened. From the point of view of Israel, it's the worst thing that happened to Jewish people since the Holocaust. Before October 7, the best solution we could do is three-state solution. We are not the enemies of Islam. We are protecting ourselves from radical groups that are trying to kill us.
When can we expect a ceasefire, and what are the terms and conditions that Israel wants?
The first one is to make sure that Hamas does not control Gaza anymore. It does not have the ability to build his force in Gaza in order to attack Israel again. And the second one is bringing back the hostages.
The collateral damage was a lot of loss of innocent civilians and babies, etc. And there's no confirmation that these high-value targets were taken out. So where do you draw the line?
The only figures that we get of dead are the figures given by the so-called Ministry of Health of Hamas in Gaza. So I'm not sure that the talk of the collateral damage of children is accurate.
Your Prime Minister's son in America essentially, and I'm quoting Israeli outlets, blamed Qatar in their role for promoting terrorism and all. Doesn't this vitiate the mediation process?
Look, at the end of the day,
Your country banned Al Jazeera.
Al Jazeera, especially in Arabic, by the way, is a poisoning tool of minds of generations to come.
Namaste, Jai Hind. You're watching or listening to the ANI podcast with Smita Prakash. My guest today is Ambassador Naor Gilon. He's appeared on the ANI podcast in episode 20, but today we converse with him as he completes his tenure as ambassador in India. At this point of time, trade ties between India and Israel stand at $2 billion. Israel-India ties saw a marked warmth ever since the BJP came to power in 2014. But then there is also this factor which hasn't changed. India recently handed over the first tranche of $2.5 million for Palestinian refugees amidst the Israel-Hamas War and reaffirmed its support to a negotiated two-state solution, leading to the establishment of a sovereign, independent and viable state of Palestine at peace with Israel. And then there's the case of Iran. Any escalation in worsening of ties between Iran and Israel could be a heavy blow to India. India's diplomatic engagements in West Asia is nothing if not a tightrope walk. My colleague Ishan Prakash joins me in this conversation with Ambassador Naor Gilon. Thank you, sir, for being part of the podcast. You complete your tenure as ambassador. But before that, I want to talk about the situation in Israel. The war on Gaza now has entered its 9th month, and by some estimates, there are some 38,000 people who've been affected by it. Either they have lost their lives, separated from families, or their homes have been destroyed. So when can we expect a ceasefire, and what are the terms and conditions that Israel wants for a ceasefire to happen?
I'll go back maybe to October 7 just to emphasize what happened. From the point of view of Israel, it's the worst thing that happened to Jewish people since the Holocaust and Second World War. In October 7 in the morning, it was a very religious Jewish holiday. 6:30 in the morning, there was an infiltration of Hamas terrorists, thousands of them, to more than 20 Jewish communities around Israel. And, they murdered 1,200 people on the way. They cut limbs, they raped, they burned people alive, and they hijacked more than a few hundred people. Now we are in a situation where there are still 120 people held hostage. Some of them are dead. We know that for a fact, but there is inability to know exactly who is alive, who is dead, because access was not granted to anyone. No names, no nothing. They share nothing. All Geneva Conventions are not relevant when you come to a terror organization. And what is the Israeli leadership defined as the two main targets of this operation in Gaza? The first one is to make sure that Hamas does not control Gaza anymore. It does not have the ability to build his force in Gaza in order to attack Israel again. And the second one is bringing back the hostages. So these are the two targets. We're still working towards achieving both of them. We had already one, we were able through military operations to release a few, but the biggest bunch was released through a deal with Hamas, with international countries mediating. And now we are discussing another deal. I think that the main problem is that from Hamas point of view, if they give up the hostages, they are afraid that they have no human shields anymore, and that Israel is less restrained in doing what it's set to put. And so they are trying to make sure that there is international pressure on Israel not to continue the war as long as there are negotiations on hostages, and that they can pull these negotiations for eternity. So they will release 20, 30 maybe in the first stage, and then it can be pulled for eternity. The whole idea for them is to survive, and the whole idea for Israel is to make sure that they are not able to control Gaza anymore. So this is really the conflict that is very hard to settle. But I hope that a deal which will include a ceasefire release, and ceasefire will happen soon. I think that the motivation now is better with Hamas, and also in Israel there is great wish to see it happen. I hope it does.
Ambassador, may I ask you, because there have been so many rounds of negotiations, there are countries mediating. In the current scenario as we sit today on this date, who are the countries that are helping the mediation process?
So it's mainly Qatar, United States, Qatar, Egypt. These are the main. Turkey is also involved somewhere there. So these are the main countries that are going between. It has to be countries who have some ability to leverage Hamas. At the end of the day, you have a terror organization. It's very hard. Who has the leverage over them in order to make them do something?
Now, I'm glad that you took the name of Qatar. Yesterday, your Prime Minister's son in America essentially blamed Qatar, and I'm quoting Israeli outlets, blamed Qatar in their role for promoting terrorism and all. Doesn't this vitiate the mediation process?
Look, at the end of the day, the leaders of Hamas, many of them are living in Qatar. Qatar has power over them.
Right.
At the end of the day, now we are looking at a tactical move in order to reach some kind of a deal that will enable release of hostages and ceasefire, limited time ceasefire. So, at the end of the day, you need Qatar there because they have some leverage over Hamas. It's like, as they say, peace you don't do you do with enemies. So, if you're not in a fight with someone. So the fact that Qatar is involved with them is the thing that gives them also leverage. So,
No, I understand Qatar's role over there. I mean, they also were playing host to the Taliban as well. So they've been there. Their voice is strong over there to mediate with such forces. My only question over here is that when something like this is going on between responsible nations, is it wise for the Prime Minister's son to make the comments against Qatar like that, especially sitting in America?
No, it's not an official spokesperson. He can say whatever he wishes to say. Whether I would agree or disagree with some of the things, I think that, by the way, Qatar is a problematic country all in all, but Qatar is very relevant now to achieving a deal, and we are pragmatic in dealing with it and going forward with the deal. Well, about the Prime Minister's son, it's his own. He's an independent person, and I would not start, double guessing or explaining what he's saying or not.
Your
saying.
Prime Minister did say, and I quote, "No Gaza ceasefire until Israel's war aims are achieved." What is the stomach for how much collateral damage is acceptable for those goals to be achieved?
I don't know what is collateral damage and how much. I think the goals have to be achieved. Collateral damage we are trying to minimize anyhow. So it's not that there is a certain point you say from here on we don't continue. We're trying anyhow to minimize. Our biggest problem is, first of all, that Gaza is the most dense populated area in the world. Secondly, Hamas for years, it didn't start now, had the tactic of, doing something to Israel, like biting, pinching Israel and running back to hide behind civilian population, or in this case, in the tunnels. They do that because they know that we are much, much stronger. And their aim, from their point of view, any Palestinian dying is someone else that creates pressure on Israel to stop the war. That's what they are aiming at doing. We, first of all, being a democratic, liberal state, law-abiding, we are trying to minimize, but also beyond all these elements, it's also our interest to minimize, because the more collateral damage there is, the more pressure there is in Israel to stop.
In Israel or on Israel?
On Israel, in Israel also, inside too, there are also voices, but mostly international community on Israel. So we have conflicting interests here, while ridiculously we have the interest of protecting the Palestinian population, and they have the interest of not protecting them, on the contrary, sacrificing them.
You said collateral damage, etc. But I want to challenge you a little bit more on this. So you said that Israel is trying to minimize collateral damage as much as possible. The recent strikes a few days ago, the Israelis were trying to pinpoint Mohammed Daif, the person that I hope I got the pronunciation right, the Hamas commander,
Mohammed Daif,
Daif, okay. Trying to get him, but the collateral damage was a lot of loss of innocent civilians and babies, etc. And there's no confirmation that these high-value targets were taken out. So where do you draw the line that there has to be proportionality and precaution when you go out with such strikes?
No. So first of all, not only about this attack in general, the only figures that we get of dead are the figures given by the so-called Ministry of Health of Hamas in Gaza. So take into account what I said before, that they have an interest in inflating numbers. Another element that is very important to notice is the fact that for them, everyone are civilians. They never differentiate between terrorists or fighters, whatever you call them, and between civilians. So from their point of view, all the dead are civilians. And there was a big group around Mohammed Daif and someone who is at the level of colonel there, that the two of them were targeted, not only Mohammed Daif. So there were bodyguards and others. I'm not sure that the talk of the collateral damage of children is accurate. I will just remind you that in the beginning of the war, they tried to frame Israel for attacking a hospital, which afterwards we found out that it was misfired.
The Al-Shifa hospital.
No, another hospital, a smaller one. That they afterwards we found out that it was a misfired rocket of their own. But it took them 1 hour to say. I think the number was 471 dead. So first of all, it did not hit the hospital. The misfired rocket, it hit the parking lot. There were maybe a few dead, maybe 10 people. But they have an interest in coming out immediately. They counted 471 non-existing bodies in 1 hour. So the figures there are played with, and we have to take it into account. We are trying to minimize collateral damage. Mohammed Daif escaped 4, 5, 6 times that we tried to kill him over the years. So we had to make sure that this time, and especially after October 7, it's the final one, because he is the chief of staff, really, of Hamas in a way, and the symbol of what happened in October 7. And I think that also from the practical capacity that he has, but also from the symbolic side that he has, we have to make clear that it's like Osama bin Laden. People like that cannot live in our world. No way. And I think the point, hopefully, is dead, and the point is made very clearly on this.
Why do you think that Israel at some point of time lost the narrative when it came to students in the US, when it came to Hollywood, people who were always your supporters? What happened? Where did Israel lose the narrative? And how do you react to that when you see your prime minister's face and being called a war criminal, and Israel being called war criminals, a bunch of war criminals? How do you react to that?
So first of all, if there is something in the question that you made that I don't agree with, is describing them as former friends of Israel. No, I would look back, first of all, to October 7, to the feed, to the Twitter, whatever they use, TikTok, wherever these guys, whether after October 7 attack, they had some sympathy towards Israel. I say it about everyone, by the way, also about politicians in India that are fast to speak against Israel, but after October 7, they couldn't even bring themselves to say it's a terrible massacre, inhumane, say something. Like Prime Minister Modi already in the afternoon of the massacre, when it was not clear yet, the magnitude already came out. This was my expectation from everyone. And we were really mad, for example, I personally, with the UN Secretary General, because he tried to make a context. So tried to explain that this October 7 is part of many years of conflict. No. Because if you try to make context, it means that you accept terrorism. Because you say, okay, under certain circumstances, terrorism is understandable, justified, whatever you want to use as adjectives. So,
as a reaction.
yeah, as if it's a legitimate reaction to go and massacre 1,200 people, 300 and something youngsters in a party, just enjoying life in an open party, not too far from Gaza. So this is the first point I wanted to make about it. And why am I saying it? Because, Jews were hated over the years. In the West, the Christians persecuted Jews from eternity, from ever. But we know Inquisition, Spain, in the last 500 years, the Holocaust, Jews were always persecuted, always hated, always different. And I think that after Second World War, after the Holocaust, it was politically incorrect to persecute or speak against Jews. People felt that, okay, we overdid it. We killed 1/3 of the Jewish population in the world, 6 million people. That was already became a thing. And unfortunately, when time passes, it becomes again legitimate. And you can see here a combination in Europe, for example. You have the extreme right that traditionally didn't like Israel. Some of them now like Israel because they see us mistakenly, by the way, as the enemies of Islam, because we are not the enemies of Islam. We are protecting ourselves from radical groups that are trying to kill us or make us disappear. Extinction. So we are not against Islam per se. Again, we are against terror and we will fight terror, but we have peace accords with I think 5 countries around us: Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, UAE, and Bahrain. With all these Arab Muslim countries, we have peace agreements with. Means that we are not in fight with the Muslim world, and we don't want to be in fight with the Muslim world. So this is one element that you have there, that right-wing groups add to that left-wing groups that today, extreme left, that they have also a political motivation now, because now they also have voters, because there is a vote bank of immigrants from North Africa and the Middle East, Muslim immigrants that they can cater to. So now that's the watermelon thing that we speak about, the left and the Muslims, the green is a symbol of Islam. This is part of the things that we have, a big coalition that is coming. Add to it that it's now legitimate to be anti-Semitic, half legitimate became, not with everyone, but with some places. And you can see statements that I never thought we'll have. But the most worrying, I think, thing for many should be in the world, because it's not only connected to Israel, it's the shallow level of university students in the Ivy League and other universities, the lack of information, the fact that they are, you see all these videos of guys coming and asking them, when you say from the river to the sea, what do you mean? What river, what sea? They know nothing about what it's like. Fashionable now to go and demonstrate, so they go and demonstrate.
When you hear that term, that slogan, what do you feel as a Jew?
No, of course, as an Israeli, as a Jew, it's the extinction of Israel, because, of course, the river is the Jordan River, the sea is the Mediterranean. That's where Israel, that's the borders of Israel. So it's clearly they want to get rid of Israel, and you see that it's out of ignorance. Some of them out of being in now TikTok. It's very nice if you do something Palestinian. And by the way, VIPs, Hollywood and others fall into the same trap, because at the end of the day, they are nurturing out of popularity. And the numbers of Muslims in the world and people and left are much greater than the supporters of Israel and Jews in the world, who are 15 million people, some of them very, by the way, critical of Israel. So there is the myth that all Jews are pro-Israel. In the US, you find a lot of Jewish groups that are against Israel.
But then also they are a wealthy community. They have which is why I can't understand. They own businesses. They own media.
They make huge endowments to these same
to
colleges.
the same colleges, and there are people from Israel, students from Israel in universities. So what I can't understand is that when you have such a vibrant population of Israelis, not just Jews, Israelis in the US, why is it that the narrative goes against you now?
Because again, it's true that the Jews are very strong, relatively strong in the US, especially in comparison to the fact that they are about 2% of the population in the US. And they have a lot of credits and merit in building many, many things in the US, from Hollywood
To the banking
to
system.
the banking system, to the press,
Media,
a lot
yeah.
of the media.
Yeah.
Washington, New York Times, who is one of the most critical papers of Israel, was known as a very Jewish newspaper. But things are changing. And again, not all Jews are for Israel, but this is not the only question. The masses are on the other side. But you see, at the end of the day, by the way, when you go to polls, still the U.S., put aside what you see on the streets, U.S. Citizens are more pro-Israel than pro the other side. That's very, very clear. It's becoming hard. We see that within the Democratic Party, there is now a division of the Quad and others. It's more. It's not Quad. You think it's 4 people. No, it's many more than 4 now. Members of Parliament who are very extra liberal.
You're talking about the squad.
The squad. The squad.
Yeah. So the Pramila Jayapal and those
Yeah,
people.
all the guys.
How do you
there.
see the...
Well, I don't want to say I want to make you uncomfortable, but I'll try and ask you this conspiracy theory that was actually floated by Prime Minister Netanyahu's son again yesterday, where he said that a lot of Qatari money comes into these colleges in the US. So maybe it could be fueling some of this protests against Israel.
There is, in general, a lot of money from the Middle East coming into the universities, including Qatari. It's known. It's not a conspiracy.
It's happening.
It's a fact.
Okay.
It's a fact. These are figures that Americans are publishing. They are setting, I will tell you what they're doing with the money many times. They are setting centers for study of Middle Eastern studies. They bring professors for years who are from the region, from our region, who are very much indoctrinated and indoctrinate their students. This is what we see here. So the Middle Eastern studies are not Israel Middle East. They are Palestinian Arab Middle East studies.
I say conspiracy theory because it was also conflated with the fact that maybe George Soros is also funding a lot of this sort of disruptive protests.
I think that George Soros gets much more credit and they attribute much more money to him, or abilities than he really has in the world. He became like, the symbol of all the bad liberal. I'm not sure that he is the only guy in the world that is doing it. As I told you, there are many Jews who are anti-Israel. It will not be a surprise. Not many, but there are quite a few. I think what happened, by the way, in the U.S., that it pushed Jews back to Judaism. So those who thought we are Americans and we are equal and we are like, no, this is not the situation. If their children cannot go, you can have the money to pay for Ivy League for your son or your daughter, but they cannot go because they are afraid, because they are Jewish, to go into university. There was a lot of incompetency, I think, of the leadership of the universities, unable to stand on what was needed, and many had to leave after hearings and scandals that came across. It's terrible. I think
so the students were asked to stay home and not attend classes physically because their security couldn't be guaranteed by the university.
The universities were taken over physically by students, demonstrators.
So tell me how it has changed the perception of Israelis towards the world after the October 7th attack. Are they fearful? How does the establishment instill confidence among its population now that they will not be discriminated in the rest of the world and that their security in the country is protected? Because as we come closer to the anniversary, that fear is also there still, I'm sure.
So, it hit the confidence of Israelis. Let's start with it in Israel, because we felt that we have things under control and nothing like that can happen. And of course, when something like that happens, it changes your whole world. And people, there are people who say we will never go back to our kibbutz. First of all the first line of kibbutzim are destroyed. You cannot go. You have to rebuild them. Parts of the kibbutz, but you cannot live in ruins. The memories are too hard, and people are still in Gaza, held hostage. And so in Israel, it was a wake-up call. Of course, it makes people more fighting. We had reserve duty like we have never had, because it's the longest war we have in modern history, modern Israel. And for us, it's a big toll on society. But this is when it comes to Israel. When we looked at the world, we never thought that we can trust the world. We were always thinking that we have to be self-sufficient in supporting ourselves. And I think that after the war, you will see more and more leaning towards self-sufficiency also in arms, in being able to build. But I mean, we manufacture sophisticated stuff, but the simple arms that you need, the artillery and the rifle and things like that, we don't have the quantity for such a long war. We never thought that we will be. And we will have to depend on friendly countries manufacturing there and agreements, because we cannot do everything in Israel. At the end of the day, we are less than 10 million people. We're very small. So I think that's when it comes to Israel, to the world. When it comes to Jewish communities around the world, I think that they were shocked. And I mentioned it before. I think that they, in a way, you can say that Israel is to be blamed, because of Israel, all this thing broke out. Because of October 7, everything broke and their life was shattered. But you understand that since Israel is the victim here, and somehow they became the victims also in their own countries, so it's only strengthened, I think, for many of them, the understanding how important Israel is for the well-being of Jewish people in the world, the only Jewish country. And I think, if anything, people who are reasonable say maybe they will stay in the US or in Europe, wherever they are. Many will immigrate, I think. But if they stay in Israel, in Europe or in the US, their connection to Israel, I think, understanding of the importance of Israel, that over the years, when Israel became another country, prospering, successful, less under defense pressure, so, people, they forgot where they come from, what are their religions. They try to think that they are British or French or Americans rather than Jewish first. But the environment will never let them. I think they got a wake-up call that for the environment, they are always Jewish and Zionist. So not enough Jewish. Also, there is another bad name. They will call you Zionist, meaning that you are supporting the existence of the state of Israel. That's Zionism. The creation of a Jewish state, the only Jewish state, and the existence of this state. And this is a very terrible situation, I think, for them. And again, there will be repercussions, I guess, and we'll see how things develop. But there is also a counter reaction. After demonstrations, you saw that in a few countries in Europe, the right wing got stronger. And I think this is all part of it, because people are saying in the Netherlands, okay? I was ambassador to the Netherlands. They say, well, in the Middle East, these Muslims killed the Jews are fighting back, and we have here riots in our streets. Why? Why do we need to have riots in our streets if there was something there not connected to us? And I think, it's and then Geert Wilders was the biggest
right-wing, yes.
The biggest winner in the elections in the last election.
But there's an argument against that as well. France has shown that the other side also can win elections as well. Even though Marine Le Pen won the first phase, the second phase was taken over by the leftists. Right?
That's a political, and then the street protest.
This is something different. Look, I think what happened in France in the second round is that there was a unification of the
tactical voting happened.
Tactical voting of the left together with the center, with Macron's party.
Yes.
And then, of course, they are stronger than the right wing. But the right wing still did very well for the European Parliament.
For sure.
And so,
But it's, Ambassador, is real politic. And this is where I want to, it's a good segue also to ask you, is there a political will in Israel for a settlement, a ceasefire, an end to this kind of aggression?
Of course, we cannot sustain it for too long, but it's very important for us to make sure before we finish that we neutralize the ability to do it again, what happened. So it's very important not to be weak here and say, for convenience now, we are stopping it. And you have to make sure that what happened on October 7 cannot repeat itself.
I ask you, Ambassador, because so Netanyahu's party has now aligned with two rather right-wing sort of parties that have a more sort of absolutist view of Israel and its relationship with Palestine. So are they a stumbling block to finally for a ceasefire?
Ceasefire, I think that everyone wants to make
or
sure...
Or peace, let's put it that way.
No, peace is a different word. I think, if anything, October 7 proved, all the world is speaking of two-state solution because they have no better ideas. I think if anything happened, October 7 proved how risky the situation is. First of all, before October 7, the best solution we could do is three-state solution. One is Israel. The other one is the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, where Palestinian Authority are. And the third one would be the Gaza state, which I remind our listeners that in 2005, Israel withdrew unilaterally from Gaza. Mm-hmm. And because we decided that we don't want to control their 2 million Arabs, Palestinians. It's not our interest. Ariel Sharon, then the prime minister, did, and it was a big tear in the Israeli society. We evacuated 10,000 settlers or people and about 20 communities. And since then, the Palestinian Authority lost the elections in 2006, a year later. In 2007, they were thrown by force. So they hate each other, the Palestinian Authority or the Fatah
and the Hamas.
They hate each other as much as they hate Israel almost.
So Mahmoud Abbas was Fatah. He was it. So what was the relationship between Fatah and Hamas, and which eventually led to Hamas taking over?
So they are in competition. Yeah. One is secular orientation, one is Hamas's religious orientation. And what I was trying to say is that in general, October 7 might give a chance in the future for two-state solution. But what did we understand from October 7? That if you leave a territory like we left for 19 years or 18 years until it erupted 23, Gaza, if they will abuse it to build a terror state, or, you don't want to have destabilization of our region. And when we speak on Judea and Samaria, on the West Bank, they are on the border of Jordan. It's not only destabilizing Israel, the potential of a failed state, if we create the same as we did try to do in Gaza, in Judea and Samaria, it means that you will have a state that is both probably destabilizing Israel, attacking Israel, and Jordan on the other side. And this is very, very dangerous. So, to speak as a slogan of two-state solution and say that's the solution, I think of anything, we have to make sure that if we create states in the future, there will be two stable, peace-seeking states. And I don't think that we have the leadership and the conditions now in the Palestinian Authority to create it.
Let me come back to what you were talking about, the long war. It's almost become a long war now. And the supplies and ammunition. You didn't realize that you would need that. And recently, the former Israeli ambassador to India, Daniel Carman, has claimed that India might be supplying arms to Israel in its war. And what was happening is the returning of favor. Because of what your country did for us in the 1999 Kargil war. India has not reacted, but I want to ask you, are Indian weapons, ammunition being used in this war?
We have a long-term tradition, I think, in general with India, but with many countries in the world. When it comes to defense cooperation, we never speak of that. There are projects that MRSAMs that we did together, but in general, all the projects of defense, we don't even put out the figures of defense cooperation. It's not public information, so I will continue our tradition and not speak about our cooperation in the past and in the present.
What about Intel cooperation? You give us Pegasus?
I don't know about Pegasus.
Viewers and listeners, please go back to episode 20 where the ambassador refused to confirm too.
In general, we have intelligence cooperation, very good counterterrorism cooperation, and I think we still have good counter-intelligence cooperation. But there is a point that we didn't touch on. I think there is a bigger vision of the world that is happening here. It didn't start with us. It was very clearly seen, I think, around the Ukraine war. We are back, unfortunately, into a situation of Cold War. So, my generation, we grew up on Cold War, and then there were 20-odd years from the collapse of Soviet Union where the world seemed to be a little bit more functioning and cooperating, and we are back into a Cold War situation. Now, it started with Ukraine, of course, where the Russians are supplied by Iran and supported by China in that direction. But the link that is very important to mention is Iran here. Because what's happening is that the attack on Israel, that the fact that we have 7 fronts, one of them is Iran itself. One night they shot 350 projectiles at Israel. But all the rest are connected to Iran or sponsored by Iran. Usually, they are financed, trained, and supplied by Iran. And we can speak of in Gaza, both Hamas and Islamic Jihad are by Iran. Both of them fight Israel. In the north, in Lebanon, which is the biggest challenge we are facing now, it's not Hamas. It's the northern border that we can speak about later if you ask, where you have Hezbollah, which is practically part of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, Shiites, and there is also ideological closeness. And then you go to, in Syria and in Iraq, you have the different factions of Shiites that are fighting there, but fighting also aiming at Israel. You go to Judea and Samaria, you have both Hamas and Islamic Jihad that are sponsored by Iran, like from Gaza. And then you go to the Houthis, who are also Iranian proxies. So, all these proxies of Iran is the head of the snake here. And this is a big issue, I think, for the world.
Ambassador, even as we are recording this, Iran has warned Israel of an obliterating war. They say that if the strikes on Lebanon continue, so this kind of tit for tat strikes that are happening, if this continues, if it intensifies, it's of concern to India also, because India has strategic interests with Iran, strategic ties with Iran. How do you see, because you've been posted here, and how do you see this India's balancing act, and where do you see it go?
I don't want to give advice to India, but I will remind that India is already affected before that, because the Houthis, a lot of the merchandise and things that India is selling to Europe is going through Bab el-Mandeb, these straits, and then to Suez Canal and into Europe, and that's already a problem. And Indian ships were hit, and Indian sailors were kept in custody. So I think it's already a problem for India. I don't know what the policy of India is. The policy of India. So we have the agreement of not interfering to each other's policy. I think we shared with India our concerns and interests. I think that India shares with us its own interests and concerns about things, and then each one will derive his own policies out of it. But I think that Iran is a big problem for our region, a big problem for many allies of India also in the Gulf countries.
Ever since you came in here in 2021, and as some of the quotes, you called Iran the biggest destabilizer in the Middle East.
I'm consistent, you see.
And then you said, then the Iranian embassy then called you the evil-minded Zionist envoy, and then there was a back and forth which went, then they said Israel is a terror house, it's a selfish, bloodthirsty regime.
You have a good research, or you got good staff, or you good memory. So
this battle between you and Iran, while you say that you want to play this diplomat's role and not interfere and not speak on behalf.
I'm not telling India what to do.
Yeah.
I'm not telling, but I'm exposing the fact what Iran is doing. The decision of India what to do with the policy of its interests, where to put them, where to prioritize. Again, Iran is a threat to UAE, to Saudi Arabia, to Bahrain, to Kuwait, to all these countries in the Gulf, which are very close cooperators and allies of India also. It's not only about Israel. I think that they are destabilizing the region. I think that if they acquire a nuclear weapon, it will be much worse, because, look, you spoke about obliterating Israel. The only country, I think, that people, river to the sea, one nuclear bomb, like Rafsanjani said in the past, one bomb can wipe Israel forever. Well, of course, we understand that he means nuclear, because conventional will not do that. All these talks about in 2040 Israel will not exist. They had this timeline that they did, the leadership in Iran. All that is very unique. I don't know any other country that people speak about.
But this war theater which is happening out here, it is of concern now to India. You listed out all that's happening. We have 9 million people of Indian origin and Indians living in the GCC countries. If this escalates, it's going to put in jeopardy millions of Indians. And talk about whether they get repatriated, what will they do here? Where are the jobs? Those who are working out here. So, it's in everybody's interest that the war ends and some kind of a formula is worked on. Are you appreciative of India's efforts to talk to these countries and come out with a solution, though India still believes in a two-state solution? There's also the China factor. China has invited the two factions from Gaza to come to China, to Beijing, and talk. How do you see all this playing out?
Again, I will not give advice to India about its policy. I think that Iran is clearly a big problem for the region. It's not about Gaza. It's a bigger problem. Their aspirations are much bigger. You know, I divide the world into... I'm not the one who will come and divide between democracy and non-democracy. I'm looking at countries. I'm looking at the countries who are... The leadership is operating for the well-being of their population, trying to promote the country, to promote the relations, to improve the betterment of the economy and whatnot, of the standard of living of the people. And countries who have aspirations that are going beyond their own borders, like ideological... So Iran is one of these countries that has an ideological approach. It's not connected now. For them, they couldn't care less about the Palestinians. They see them as a tool. It's a tool that they can use for less money and less price for them. They did the same to the Americans with the Shiite to start counting body bags after the American invasion to Iraq. This is what they do. That's how they do. Their real competition in the Middle East is between Shia and Sunni. So they are trying to, you know, they felt that it was unfair that the whole Middle East, before Arab Spring and everything, was really one Shia state, which is Iran, and let's say that there were Shia, even majorities, but they were never in power. In Bahrain, the Shiites are a big majority. In Lebanon, they have power. They're not a majority, but they're the biggest minority of the groups. And so they have now Lebanon, but they feel that all the rest of the countries are Sunni countries. And they're trying to change the balance. This is the real war in the middle. We are now, in the way, an opportunity that prevailed.
Crossfire.
No, not crossfire, because they built this ability to attack Israel for years. It didn't start now. It's done for years, this idea of creating, encircling Israel and giving the capacity to different organizations. I'm not sure that they meant to, and that's why they are very cautious about Hezbollah. I don't think that they want Hezbollah to go into a full war with Israel. But we might go, and I said before, the challenge is in the northern border. And why is it the challenge? Because we evacuated close to 100,000 people, both from around Gaza. 70%, I think, are back home. The first line, as I said, cannot go back home. And we evacuated close to that number also in the northern. So about 5 kilometers from the border, we evacuated. Now, while the people in the south can say, although there are still rockets coming to Israel periodically from Gaza, they can say, at least we know that the IDF did an operation and eliminated big capacities of Hamas. On the northern border, okay, we killed, according to Hezbollah, we killed close to 400 of its people, but still, it's a big organization, very, very strong, and the people will not go back to their places if they don't get a change. They want a change. So one way is, what we wanted is to implement Resolution 1701, UN Security Council Resolution 1701, that is calling Hezbollah to go northern to the Litani River, which is 8 to 10 kilometers from the border, and to implement it in the way of peace. If not, we might, in order to convince our citizens to go back, we'll have to do it by force, and no one is looking for that. So we are not looking for another war, but we hope that this is doable. I mean, they started a war with Israel, and they are limiting the war, and I think that they understand they have ability to cause damage to Israel, but we have ability to create great damage to Lebanon. They are Lebanese, they are controlling Lebanon, and I think they understand that, and they don't want to be dealing in the next 15, 20 years, spending all the Iranian money on reconstruction of Lebanon. So we are looking for a solution that will be diplomatic there, but will enable our citizens to go back and not fear direct firing into their houses like it's done now through anti-tank.
Are they also aiding the operational commanders of Hamas Hezbollah?
Yeah, there is cooperation between them all the time. They share they used to train together in the past. They're sharing information. Yeah, there is cooperation.
And the October 7th, you think, was a joint effort with Hezbollah's blessing?
No,
Even aiding?
I think that it was. I don't know yet. We'll find out. But it was probably a Hamas thing, kept very secret. I'm not sure that anyone else knew the date, but there was an understanding or hope that Hezbollah, once it happens, will come in, and also people in Judea and Samaria will join Hamas there. So the expectation was there.
The 2-front or 3-front?
More, yeah. As I said, 7 fronts now, but they wanted to multi-front. I think that Hezbollah joined in less than Hamas hoped. They hoped to have a full-fledged war. They understood that if our attention is given to Gaza, it's a problem for them, the military attention. So, they hoped for more. I'm not sure it's coordinated. I think the preparedness or preparing the forces to that day was working together probably. But we will have one day, when war ends, probably a good investigation committee that will go into all that details.
Isn't it happening simultaneously?
No, there are operational checks by the military now, but we need usually an independent outside body headed by a judge, the Supreme Court judge usually. This is the format that will happen.
Who are the top commanders of Hamas that if Israel takes them out, maybe there'll be an end to this war?
Clearly, Mohammed Def was one of them. Yahya Sinwar is another guy there. There are 4 or 5 top people, but all of them will be replaced, by the way. It's not that to think, but these are very critical also to the ideology, to the strength, to uniting the people, to being able to get assistance from countries like Iran and other countries. So all of that, it will delay them and make it hard for them for a few years probably to rebuild. But it's not about only the people. I mean, we dismantled great capacities of Hamas, military capacities, a lot of the tunnels. There were hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of tunnels. Think of how much...
You saw the videos.
How much aid or assistance, international assistance came in cement, in metal, and all that is needed. Instead of building buildings, they were digging tunnels. This is terrible. And we will have to find a solution together with Egypt on the border with Egypt, because we cannot, again, if we let the border, if the Philadelphia road, as we call it, will be open again in a way for smuggling, and we will meet ourselves, or we will be in the same situation in a few years. It will take them a few years to rebuild, but we want to make sure that arms are not coming in, dual use is not coming in, and we'll have to find.
Why did Israel let go of this Sinwar? He was in your prisons.
Because the Gilad Shalit deal, speaking of hostages, we had a soldier that was kidnapped, and we released about 1,000 terrorists, including Sinwar. Sinwar was also probably on our targets a few times, and because we were not in a situation of war, and because there were maybe people around him that we didn't want to harm, so we didn't take action. But now we have to look again. No one expected that October 7 will happen. If we would have known that this is in the cards, in this level of penetration, of course, that, we call it, the Americans call it the Monday morning quarterback. Of course, retrospectively, in hindsight, retrospectively, we would have done things differently. But now we know already, we understand, and we will do things differently. And the first thing is the security of the people of Israel and making sure it will not happen again, and bringing back the hostages. These are the 2 concerns. Hostages are very important, because beyond the fact that there are children there and people from one was 9 months when he was kidnapped, and the oldest were in late 80s. Beyond that, it's part of the cohesiveness of the Jewish society. So we have a code.
It's said that every family has been affected in some way or the other. How have you been affected? Have you been affected?
Personally, our family was not affected, but many, many friends. So it's in the embassy, we had 2 first cousins of a cousin and a nephew, a niece, I should say, of 2 of our diplomats who were killed. on the, and we had a guy an Israeli whose wife used to work in the embassy. They stayed here for business. He went to Israel to fight. When war broke, he volunteered. He's here. He shouldn't. It wasn't compulsory for him, and he went to volunteer, and he was wounded. I don't know severely, but he's still limited until today and cannot go back to full function. Still problems. So we had people, but the whole atmosphere. My children, my grandchildren are in Israel. They went into shelters in the beginning. It's not a comfortable situation.
And your wife also was...
My wife was, because our youngest daughter is in military service. My wife, in the last year or so, more so after October, shuttled between Israel and India.
To look after the children.
More Israel than India. I had to be there especially in the beginning, because there was a state of shock. And one of my sons was taken to 2 months of reserve duty. So my wife was helping the son's wife and with the grandchildren. So my wife was more there.
Ambassador, we were talking about the narrative wars. One of the things is media. Your country banned Al Jazeera, and there was a lot of outrage over that. Could you tell me what was the thinking behind banning media and banning Al Jazeera?
No, it's only Al Jazeera.
Only Al Jazeera.
Only Al Jazeera. There are two elements about Al Jazeera. First of all, we found out that Al Jazeera is also collecting and transferring information. When they film things that is helping the other side. But worse than that, I think I'm following Al Jazeera for the last 20-odd years.
Yes.
Al Jazeera, especially in Arabic, by the way, is a poisoning tool of minds of generations to come. So it's a very problematic news channel, network, and really building hate towards the West, towards others. And okay, we have hate this generation, but we always have the hope that future generations will be better. But if future generations are fed by Al Jazeera, and not only, it's not in Israel, it's all
India
around the world.
It's in India. We've seen them in Kashmir.
India, US, Europe, the young generations are listening to Al Jazeera and watching them, and they're poisoning the minds. They are leading us to a catastrophic collision of cultures and religions in the world. And this is really bad. So
it's a wonder that Qatar is talking to you, because this is again a Qatari broadcaster.
No, at the end of the day, Qataris are 250,000 people, more or less. They do whatever they need to survive. They have their own. They are what in their eyes to have influence. So they are trying to have influence on what's happening in our region.
How do you see, if it's almost a year since the attack, how do you see social media? How do you think they reacted? And what was Indian social media? Because you were in India when all this happened.
So I would say, first of all, I think that part of the very bad situation we have in the world is social media. It's connected to being superficial and being uninformed, because the young people of today, they don't see any. In the past, when we grew up, there were traditional media, and you knew the line. The editor was right, left, liberal. You knew what is the line of the paper. It was usually the papers or the TVs will try to be reliable within the line. So play with the truth and present it in a way that is presenting their line. But you knew the line. There was an editor. There was an eyes seeing and watching the credibility. Today, social media, there is no credibility, zero credibility. There is nothing. You put now on TikTok some kind of video, it's a fact. Doesn't matter what you say there. It's a fact. If you made it in a presentable way that people are attracted to the way you present it, the content is bought automatically. There is no any kind of screening, any more information. It's a big problem, I think, in the world. Here in India, again, part of it may be attributed to the fact that TikTok is banned here. I think TikTok is the worst. We found it the worst. And when we say bad or worst, we see that they are, for example, pro-Israeli content is blocked or limited, and pro-Palestinian, pro-Gaza is flooded. So, people who, that's their profession, say that it's intentionally done by decision. But not only there, by the way. We see that also on Instagram. And then you will come and say, but Instagram is part of Facebook, Zuckerberg, Jewish guy. No, it doesn't work like that. The world doesn't work.
Algorithms are determined by
No, I'm
other
glad
people.
you brought up Instagram. We saw it with the All Eyes on Rafah, that campaign that happened.
Yeah.
And so many Hollywood stars also stood up. I guess it's a very polarizing
Bollywood.
issue. And Bollywood as well.
Bollywood too, yes.
And then when a similar sort of page happened when there was a terror attack in Riyasi,
No,
over
nothing,
there,
no.
that was taken down. We didn't see it over there when they had those All Eyes on Riyasi or whatever.
It's
Yeah.
all the time like that.
So-
That's the world. It's a cynical world. Again, I think we Israelis, you are 1.4 billion people. You can take decisions that suit you, and there is very little the world can do about it. But we are 10 million people, but we are very, very determined. We will fight for our existence, and no one can. I mean, we will not let anyone come, and we will not be afraid to take action because the world is threatening us. There is also abuse of the UN in general, a terrible abuse towards Israel. They are all the time focusing, and when we try to bring the attention on Gaza to add the hostages, for example, or something like that, we are, of course, because it's a political body, we see that there is cynical use of ICJ, International Court of Justice, and ICC, the International Criminal Court. Both of them are being abused. Very, very bad for me that ICC is dealing or equating between a terror organization attacking a democratic country and the democratic country coming to defend itself. So if you start chasing democratically elected leaders, you have a problem. And Israel is one of the most vibrant democracies in the world. We had, in 3 years, 5 election campaigns. It's not a good thing, it's a bad thing, but it shows you how strong or how dynamic is the democracy and how strong is the court in Israel. So it's unbelievable that they're dealing with us. I think it's bad for the world because it's a precedent that we knew would come, by the way. We never joined the ICC. ICC and ICJ, by the way, were ideas of Polish Jewish lawyers after Second World War to prevent another genocide. And now we knew that it will be abused against us. Also the Americans, also India, did not join the ICC because it was clear that the way it's constructed, it will bite back. It will be utilized by others. And that's exactly what's happening here. So we are not members of ICC because we didn't want to join. We went to Rome, the Rome Declaration, everything. But what we didn't join. And yet they are accepting that the Palestinians, who are not a member state in the UN, they are not really a member state because in order to be a member state, you have to go through Security Council, and they did not go through Security Council. So they are taking the Palestinian complaint, which they're not supposed to take, against a country which is not a member state, which has a very strong, independent legal system that our politicians don't like for that reason exactly. And it's unbelievable what's happening. It's very, very cynical. But again, it's our survivability. It's not that we have an option here. We want to be nice. We want to have a ceasefire. No one will come to our help. We are defending ourselves. Our children are fighting. And we will continue fighting because the alternative is not non-existent for Jewish people in the world. We saw what happened when we lived in Europe. Our lives were always catastrophe after catastrophe. So, no. We will fight.
You're saying nobody comes to your help. How do you see the Democratic Party, how they were last year when the attack happened? What do you say about the support that came your way from America? Not enough, or not as much as expected? What was it?
No, when I say that we don't expect anyone to come to our help. I mean, we want ammunition to give us to fight. We never will ask anyone to spill their blood in order to protect Israel. That's not part of it. And I think that the U.S. administration, Biden administration, did an amazing act of support to Israel. Immediately after October 7, they sent carriers to carrier fleets to our region to send a signal to Iran.
Not to escalate.
They have helped Israel. We have disagreements, but this is part of life. But I think in general, Biden, as the president, was very, very, very pro-Israel, together with his Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense. I think this triangle was very strong in support of Israel.
And now Trump has picked a VP candidate who's very pro-Israel. How do you see that happening with the Republican Party? It seems to be bipartisan, the support towards your country.
I think that in large, it's bipartisan. As I said before, the noises that you hear from the young people are there. The misinformed young people, I would say, many of them misinformed. Yet the majority of Americans are still pro-Israel. It changes with age. The older they are, the more pro-Israel they are, by the way, because they are more informed, they know the history, they learned, they saw something, thing or two in life, I think. The younger they are, it's sometimes more problematic, but in general, there is a bipartisan support to Israel.
I'm glad you brought up Trump. Was the Trump peace plan, this thing that was made by Jared Kushner before Israel and Palestine, was it a viable plan when it came in 2020?
It still is, because the Abraham Accords were a big success, I think, because they enabled the diplomatic relations with UAE and with Bahrain and Morocco. What happened, Sudan also, but Sudan was torn afterwards. And what happened is that this also enabled Saudi Arabia. All the discussions about Saudi Arabia are part of that. By the way, all the discussion of IMEC
was also, yes,
came from that. I2U2, the India, Israel, US, UAE, the idea of taking the Abraham Accords and making them into business opportunities or cooperation between the countries, but also Saudi Arabia, the fact that they are ready now to speak and want to speak. Unfortunately, the extremists in the region understood that, and I think one of the motivations for October 7 was the notion that Saudi Arabia, which is a very important country, is on the verge of joining this group, and they wanted to prevent it. And so far, they were successful probably in delaying it. But if you look at the positions of Saudi Arabia, which has criticism on Israel, as well as the other countries, Bahrain, UAE, Morocco, they all kept their relations with Israel. And it's a very inconvenient situation because there is a lot of incitement in the streets. So they have to deal with a lot of incitement within their population.
To convince their population.
And still they are standing by the peace agreements. Each one, of course, is changing and doing it in its own way. But I think it's very sustainable. And I think that regardless whether it's Trump or Biden next president, it will continue.
But I'm sorry, Ambassador. Isn't the issue of Jerusalem a very emotive issue that both sides have sort of red lines, and that is the sticking point in this accord to actually go through? That's why I question the viability of Trump's peace plan.
No, I don't think so. With Saudi Arabia mostly, not with the other countries. I think Jerusalem is enjoying freedom of religion for all three monotheistic religions and all factions there, like it never enjoyed before under Israel. So, each one has his own ability to pray there. And even in times, even after October 7, during Ramadan, we made sure that the maximum numbers of people can come and pray in the temples, Mount Temple. And I think this will not be there is a discussion of what is the end game on the political thing with the Palestinians. But again, it's not in the cards now. We can agree on principles for the future. Jerusalem is one of the discussions, but I don't think that it's the main obstacle to this.
Will they be okay with Jerusalem being the capital of Israel?
Let's get there. Again, there are many ways you can do it, which enables them to live with. People can be very creative at the end of the day. And by the way, Jerusalem was only a Jewish capital. It was never a capital of any other religion in the world.
Let me flip it. Would Israelis be okay with East Jerusalem being with the Palestinians?
I don't think we are there. I think it's jumping ahead of the wagon in the sense of we are not even close to, we don't have a reliable partner to deal of the idea of a final agreement or anything of the sort. So, we discussed in the past, I don't know, hopefully we will discuss in the future what are the end games that we can live together with coexistence and peaceful coexistence for years. We are not there now. We are now in preventing a crisis.
And bringing back the hostages.
After that, over time, we will have to go back to the political track and see what we can do, what we can't do. I think we can do, again, if we have the right partner. In the Palestinian Authority, unfortunately, no elections, no popularity, no power to the leadership there, to Mahmoud Abbas. That's a problem. He has no legitimacy. Without Israeli presence there, I doubt it if he would survive. It will be a copy-paste of what you saw in Gaza, might have happened there. And unfortunately, we have the same enemies, by the way. The Hamas and Islamic Jihad that are fighting us are also fighting him. These are the same enemies. So, we are serving a bigger cause, Israel, by fighting the extremists. I think in general in the world, we are serving a bigger cause, because what the Americans did when they fought ISIS, these radical Sunni ideas, where they were able, not Americans, it's the international coalition led by the Americans, they were able to kill quite a lot of them, and many dispersed. So the organizational structure was destroyed. But these people are many of them are around the world, back to their countries. The ideology is still engraved in them inside. The issue is that if there will be the notion in the world that terror organizations like Hamas, which is a medium-sized organization, are able to defeat a strong country like Israel, considered the strongest army in the region probably, it will give backwind for them to think that now they have a chance.
Expand the
They have
conflict.
an opportunity. Now it's a good time. We'll take the motivation. And many of them, by the way, are around India. Many of these ISIS people went to Bangladesh, came from Bangladesh and went back, and are in Maldives. They are in many places around here that you would see people. So I think the war is a bigger war that we are fighting here. It's uncomfortable for some Western elements to understand that, to feel that they are part of this war. But it's their war. And if we will not be able to prevail, it will come to bite them in their own countries, I think. Worse than, we know already waves of terror during the Islamic State time, and this can reoccur. The people are there, the motivations are there. Only need a small push and you will find it.
Ambassador, let me bring it towards India, the conversation towards India. There are about some 50 or 60,000 workers who were to go to your country and work in the reconstruction process out there following this October attack. How safe are they? And the trust element with Indian workers going out there?
So, yeah, we had already before many caretakers
Yes.
In Israel from India working. Now, in the beginning, we wanted more in agriculture. Now it's going more towards construction business. Unfortunately, there was an Indian farm worker who died from Kerala, who died in an attack in one of the kibbutzim in the north. Farms is a problem. Farms, they have to continue working also in time of war, and it's more risky, but under the request of the Indian government, we pulled them back as much as what we gave. They requested to pull them back, not to put them in the front line. But mostly now are going construction workers. Construction are done in cities. You don't build a building in an area of zone, because first of all it can be ruined. And secondly, no one will buy it.
Yeah.
Okay, no one. It's not timed. So mostly it's done far away in building in areas of in the big cities or around the center of Israel. So I think they're much safer in this sense. We are very happy with them. I think that it's a good people-to-people thing, because they go to Israel. And again, in India, it's the place where I found the most positive approach towards Israel in my career. I think the average approach to Israel is very, very positive. By the way, it goes also the other way. In Israel, the approach to India is very positive. And I think that these people that will be exposed there to Israel, to what Israel really is, they will come back and will have more people who can speak. We like to call them ambassadors, but I feel too many ambassadors makes me weaker. But in general, they come back as ambassadors of the relations between our countries and people. So I see it very positive.
We spoke about democracy in your country, democracy in our country. Now, OpenAI has claimed that an Israeli firm, Stoic, had tried to interfere in India's Lok Sabha elections. Has any action been taken against that Israeli firm?
Not that I know of, not that I know that it really happened, or I have no idea whatsoever about it. There are so many players today in social media in the world trying to we had attacks on Israel. Is the most attacked country in the world, by the way, even before October 7, from the point of view of cyber. So, everyone is trying to manipulate, many around the world, whether it's governments, whether it's companies. So I was never approached about it, and I don't know even if it's true.
Yeah.
And I don't know the company itself, by the way.
OpenAI made this allegation?
Yeah. At the
OpenAI
time.
has a lot to answer for its own stuff over here, with this ChatGPT giving weird answers.
No, things
ripping
are,
off from
I'm
Indian
telling you,
publishers. Yeah.
It's very, they accused a few companies and countries.
Yeah.
Not only that, but but in general, I think that we are being manipulated, or people are trying to manipulate the fact that they have social media and ability now and AI, which is a great tool of manipulation of people. We see how good are the speeches that they do.
Yes.
They take a leader, put a speech in his mouth. And
yes, there was an
amazing.
active involvement during the Indian elections. The Home Minister his video was manipulated.
So I think, it's very, it will be, I think that the democratic world will have to, it's relevant mainly for the democratic world, will have to develop its own tools.
Grapple with these tools also, which are so easily accessible and can manipulate elections.
I think that the same other AI tools should be done in order to prevent that from happening and identifying manipulated texts and things like that. So
there's also that one person, right, who just was fighting every war, every attack. He was there.
The Palestinian guy.
Yeah, the Palestinian guy.
He was there as a nurse. He was there as a journalist.
Victim.
He was there everywhere. Yeah.
Crying or happy, and he was
and like several lives he's had, I think.
Wonder where he is right now.
Yeah.
I know. I just wanted to talk. In the last 10 years, we have seen this ascension of India-Israeli ties. Tell me, what is it? The personal relationship with PM Modi had with PM Netanyahu. What was it that this steady increase has happened in our ties?
So there is a secret ingredient that I did not I fully understand yet.
Some masala, right?
There is something very special between the people. It's the people to people is the secret. Somehow, as I said, both in surveys in Israel, India became a comparative one that were done. India became I think the first place in popularity among Israelis, and Israelis for years been coming here for full immersion visits after the military service for 6,
we see them in Goa all the time.
6, 7, 8 months.
Manali.
We call it the hummus trail, where they go, because you find a lot of hummus restaurants.
And you find other things also, but okay.
There are many things you can find there.
Yeah.
So, for years, and it starts, Jews lived here for 2,500 years. Now I saw a stone that was found here, a graveyard stone of 1,000 years or 800 years ago, something like that. So in India, Jews lived here, and they were Indians. They were not like there are Indian Jains and Indian Hindus and Buddhists and Muslims and Jews.
So civilization linkages.
It's part of being an Indian. It's part of that you have your own religion and enjoy it as much as you want. So in general, I think there is something very interesting. And then was Jews, there were famous Jews along the years like General Jacob and like the Sassoon family, for example, in Mumbai. That's until today, some of their charity work, schools, hospitals, library are still there, foundation are still there. So Jews were here part and parcel, and then came First World War, and Indians were part of the Anglo-Indian army, which liberated 30 years from the Turks, 30 years later became Israel. So there is a lot in the past. And then somehow there is something, maybe because Israel was assisting, not like Ambassador Carmona, I will not go into details, but assisting India from the 60s on the defense side, cooperating, water technology which came here. I don't know, each one has his own reason why.
And 2611 also.
2611. Each one has his own reason why he likes Israel in India, but most like. This is the interesting thing. And this is a very nurturing environment for a politician who is also pro-Israel, like Prime Minister Modi, Dr. Jaishankar, and all the group there. I think they are very big supporters of Israel. And when they know that the public is also supporting their policy, it's very, it's an easy shot. And the relations between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Prime Minister Modi, the visit of Prime Minister Modi, the first Prime Minister to visit Israel, Indian Prime Minister in 2017, then a few months later, 2018, Netanyahu here, I think that was a game changer for our relations. So the relations are very, very good in all fronts. And again, your relations are good with many countries. India is a growing power, superpower maybe already. It's the definition that people here don't like to go into. But India is a very important power, size of population, economy, everything, geostrategically. And India is courted by many countries today.
But it's not just Netanyahu, right? I mean, you worked with Shimon Peres, you've worked with Yitzhak Rabin. So tell me which...
Started with David Ben-Gurion. Our prime minister wrote in his memoirs, India was late to acknowledge Israel. Israel was established in 48, declared in 48, and only in 1950 did Nehru recognize Israel. And Prime Minister Ben-Gurion wrote that now that India joined the Soviet Union and the US in acknowledging Israel, the cycle is complete. He was a great believer, Ben-Gurion, although, he and Gandhi were parallel, I don't want to sister movements, because we believed in using power against the Brits. Some of us.
So-called non-violent.
Yeah, so, but in general it was parallel. In the same time, coming out, after hundreds of years of British control, we after British mandate from the end of First World War. So, in general, I think that there was a lot of affiliation. Tagore, Einstein, connections. Over the years, they were people that somehow Jews and Hindus, they had connections. It comes to today, really, and all the prime ministers, all the Israeli politicians understand you are the biggest democracy in the world. At the end of the day, we see ourselves as the democratic bloc of the world. These countries, some of them more liberal, some less liberal. I hate when people try to put limitations on democracy. Not every democracy has to be a liberal democracy, by the way. There are democracies that the countries, India is one of them, I think, that is more conservative by nature. Indians are more conservative. It's a very tolerant society, but it's a very conservative society, religious society at the same time. And it's okay to have a democracy that is more liberal and a democracy that is less liberal in the values, because each one has its own beliefs, and where the religion plays a role, where the family plays a role. We all are curved from different stones in this sense. So I think that it's another thing, being close to India for so many years, being both democracies. We always, the joke in Israel that India and Israel together, we are 1/5 of the world's population. Our 10 million and your 1.4 billion.
Join it. Yeah. So you talked about our people-to-people linkages. I also want to talk about the business communities in both the countries. Does the Israeli business community see India as just one big marketplace, ripe for the picking to, I don't want to use the word exploit, but basically to make a lot of money? Or is there, both sides respect each other and there's a mutual acknowledgement that we can transfer technology, we can transfer knowledge power, and grow mutually. Yeah.
Trade also $2 billion.
But there's
much more.
More than that now?
Much more. 2023, your numbers were close to $10 billion of trade. Because there are also diamonds going in between, which are commodity. It's a different... diamond trade, but going there and back, which the numbers are. But in general... it doesn't matter what the Israeli businessman thinks. The matter is what the Indian government does. Indian government introduced Make in India, and people have to go along with that. So, and again, we are not a country of commodities. We are a country of technology.
Yes.
And so, it's less relevant to selling here cheap, and Israel being very. Impatient people, the Israelis, we don't have we have a few, but multinational companies. Most of our companies are technology companies, small, medium size, trying to sell their technology and make an exit. That's the fast money, fast. It takes a few years, but to bring cutting edge technology, finding someone who is interested or going to an IPO in the market, and going on to the next project in life. And just to I hope it will happen, but an Israeli company, Wiz, cyber company, there are now discussions in the press, I hope it's true. It's 4 guys who did an exit, already nice exit, sold to Microsoft, the company, coming out of the military.
Yes. That was a very big multi-billion-dollar deal
and
that's
now
happening.
Wiz-
It's a cybersecurity firm again.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
Wiz,
yeah.
Wiz now, it seems that Google are, according to the press, it was not released yet, officially, Google is looking into procurement of this small Israeli company for $23 billion. The biggest procurement by far of Google. Google already bought a few companies in Israel, by the way. The biggest so far that we had Israeli company exit was Mobileye. It's autonomous cars capacity, which was sold to Intel for $15 billion, 1.5. So it's going to be, if it happens, a big thing. And these are serial entrepreneurs. So they did an exit. They already had a few $100 million each at home. So, but they continue to the next venture. That's why we are not the ones who would come to exploit the market. We are completing rather than competing, I think, in many senses. There are also mismatches between us. So where we are, both of us have technologies. Israel, in India, because of the size and the economy, the importance is not more the price than the quality. Quality comes second. As long as the price is okay and the quality is okay, it's okay. Israelis, we are a very expensive country and very expensive to do R&D. So they look to create the world-leading technology in their field and get the top world prices for that. So this is a little bit an issue that has to be resolved between the economies. But in general, I think that there is a lot to do together because India has what Israel lacks. You have big markets, not only internal market, but also international. You are connected to the region and beyond. So we can come here with the technologies that are relevant for markets that you are strong in, your own and others, give it to Indian companies to manufacture, especially in places where manufacturing is important or computing power is important, because all these are here in abundance and much cheaper than in Israel, and that can be a good opportunity.
So I think we've run out of time, but then I'm going to ask you two questions as we end. One is, what were the biggest ups and downs in your tenure in India? And two, what memories are you taking back of Indian food, Indian popular culture, and even outfit? You're wearing a bandgala.
Oh, we will speak about the outfit and food. So the biggest, I think the lowest point is October 7th for all of us. It's changed our lives. It changed the focus.
Yeah.
We couldn't do anything. The highest point, the lowest is not connected to India directly, but influenced my life in India and my life in Israel in general as an Israeli. The highest point, there were too many. I think I was privileged. I never visited India before I came here. And it was a huge privilege to come to a country. I served all the time in Europe and the US. To come to a place where you feel the growth, you feel the change, the energy, the positive. Israel is like that too, by the way, but much smaller. But you see here, people are trying to climb up to the success level, and this is very, very amazing.
And you were here during COVID years.
I was here at the tail of the COVID. Tail of COVID. Still some minimal restrictions when I arrived, but the journey here was amazing, really. And the popularity, the support to Israel, always after October 7 also. It's heartwarming because at the end of the day, I said, we fight our own wars. You know how many people wanted to volunteer on social media, wrote to me, I want to volunteer. And I have to tell them, look, we don't think people shouldn't die for us, but fight for us on social media. And people did fight for us here in India on social media. So our situation here was relatively good. And the feeling that you are not alone in the world is always good. It makes you stronger in the sense of, gives you motivation and good feeling. When it comes to clothing, food, I'll tell you, there is a problem with Indian food. According to my tailor, who every time I go to him, he has to remeasure me because it doesn't fit the previous measurements. He tells you something about food and clothing. So no, I really
Pick
enjoy.
a favorite. What do you like best about Indian food? Which ones do you like?
What is Indian food? You have to teach me because I don't know Indian food. I went to Madhya Pradesh. I saw one food. I went to Nagaland. I saw another food. In Delhi, it's a different food. And so, I eat...
Did you you eat...
Chicken tikka I love. I'll tell you, this is the softness of the chicken. Chicken I love in general. Very popular in Israel in general. I love chicken tikka, this version of the chicken. I love the paneer. So the idea of you call it cottage cheese. In Israel, cottage cheese is something totally different, but it's really good. So I don't know. The paneer is something that probably we'll take with us. No, food is amazing in India. I mean, and again, what is food? There's so much. Maharashtra, you get one food. So every place,
Did you try anything adventurous?
Nagaland, you said, so Nagaland food is not something which...
No, spicy. I love spicy, so it's not a problem.
So the bhoot jolakia, that's peppers you had?
No problem with spices and the peppers. I go for them.
Yeah.
Sometimes I am sorry afterwards that I did it. That I was too. No, but in general, I love spicy food. So for me, it's not a challenge. The spicy. I eat kosher style, so I will not eat seafood and I not eat certain things. But in general, food here was...
What will you miss when you go back to Israel?
I will not miss anything. I'll come back to visit. Why should I miss?
Nice.
I'll come back. So if I don't come back, I'll miss. But first, you have in Israel, and you have been there, I think.
Yes.
Good Indian restaurants by Indians. So it's again, it will not be all the kinds of Indian food. It will be usually Northeast or something like that, North India. But again, I'll come back and visit. So in order to make sure that I don't miss anything.
We look forward to hosting you again. Thank you so much for sparing time and speaking with Ishan and me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching or listening to this edition of the ANI podcast with Smita Prakash. Do like or subscribe on whichever channel you have seen this or heard this. Namaste. Jai Hind. Click here to watch the previous episodes.